and welcome to another Sentry Snack of the Week. Today we're going to be talking about HTTP status codes and when HTTP 200 might not be okay. I'm Salma from the Developer Relations team at Sentry. Let's do it. Recently, I made a call to an API endpoint asking for some data that didn't actually exist. Yes, I made a typo. Now, in making this typo, I expected to receive an HTTP status code of 404, not found. But what I actually received was an HTTP 200, indicating that everything was okay. But it wasn't okay, at least for me. I got no data, and at this point, I got no indication of actually what was wrong. Now, after investigating, this was by design. The endpoint I was calling /users was allowing me to get information for one or more users. And this is perfectly aligned with RESTful API design. Via this API endpoint, I can request data for up to 100 users. And if the API completely failed, if I made a typo in just one of those user requests, that would have been a pretty poor developer experience. If you want to read the full story, the link to the blog post is in the description. But here's a question for you. If the API is RESTful and it returned me nothing, should the HTTP status code really be 200? Could the status code have been more representative? Now, I have looked through the list of HTTP status codes, and I actually can't find a better one. And this approach mirrors the conventions of GraphQL APIs, where every query returns an HTTP 200 regardless of whether or not there are errors. If there are errors, they're returned in the body of the response. Now, all of this is fine, it's just different conventions. But when things do go wrong, receiving an HTTP 200 regardless can make things difficult to debug sometimes. So when you're building stuff for the web and consuming APIs, consider the design of the API itself in your code, especially with regards to the HTTP status codes you might end up receiving. Preempt what might go wrong, code defensively around it, and when you're building APIs, decide when an error really is an error. Is an empty response an error, or is it really okay?